So, as promised, this week we are going to be talking about plot twists and how to employ them, and also how much pre warning you need to give readers about this plot twist. So, let's start with the fact that plot twists are good and useful, and they should be used with care. So, yep, it is Nid, at least to the best of my ability. So plot twists are times, just to define it, are moments when a story goes in a direction the reader did not probably, we hope, anticipate. So things go weird. Some good examples of plot twists are moments like Darth Vader being Luke's father in Star Wars. That is a plot twist. Or Thanos getting all the Infinity Stones and dusting like half of the Avengers. That counts as a plot twist. There are other good plot twists where characters discover things that readers or viewers or consumers of that media are like, oh no, I did not necessarily expect that to go that way, but here we are. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to get everybody with the plot twist. Yes, exactly. A good plot twist here would be saying today's meeting is cancelled. That is the plot twist. There isn't one. No, today's meeting is not canceled. We're having it. I promise. I'm here. But it's times when you're taking the plot in a direction the reader didn't expect. In a good way, preferably. Because if you're just wandering off into the weeds and the reader's like, hey, wait, no. There you go. So, let's start with some examples of good plot twists. What do you guys think are some of your favorite plot twists? Like moments when a movie, a TV show, a book left you going, wait, what? That is... like, how is this going on? Donnie Darko? Yeah, that movie's complicated, and I'm not sure anybody gets it. It's a surrealistic nightmare. It's a good movie, but it's surreal. Okay. Anybody else? No, you don't need to. Honestly, if the thing has been out long enough, don't put a spoiler tag. That's fine. Like, we're talking. Let's not do immediate, like, recent releases, but if you aren't coming up with any, it's okay. I'm challenging everybody to think about some plot twists they like so that we can discuss things in more detail. Yeah, if it's over. I mean, heck, I'd say if it's older than, like, 3 to 5 years, you shouldn't need to spoiler it. Like, if somebody spoilers the original Star Wars for somebody, then they're doing, they did that to themselves. If people haven't seen the most recent Avengers movies, well, it's been a few years. Sixth Sense, yeah, that was a good one.
Pretty much anything Shyamalan, because he bases his movies around the plot twist.
Yeah, my husband says that he likes most of M. Night Shyamalan's media because he bases everything around twists and kind of likes to make things go in directions the audience doesn't anticipate. Some of these are things I'm not going to be recognizing, but that's okay with me.
Da Vinci
Soylent
Code.
Green? Da Vinci Code?
The professor at the end being the bad guy.
Ah, the professor at the end of the bad guy being a bad guy in the Da Vinci Code, yeah. We're not even going to talk about it because it would be cool if they made an Avatar The Last Airbender movie, and it's a pity they didn't. And I hope you can feel my stare from here.
The twist is the movie never existed.
Yeah, the twist is the movie didn't exist. We don't talk about it. The Island, yep. Alright, so those are some examples of plot twists that you enjoyed. Thinking about them.
Fight Club.
Fight Club, that's another really good one, that's a classic. Thinking about those twists. If you think about the movie as a whole, afterwards, could you see the way they were piecing them together? Like if you take a look at the movie and you go back over it, can you see the plot twist being seeded through the movie? And I'm not saying obviously, like it might require you having watched the movie once or read the book once and go back and be like, oh, I can see the pieces coming together. That's okay. Like that's what we're talking about here. It's okay if you can't think of one right now. You might come up with it later, so that's all right. There's no shame in not having an answer right now. I'm seeding questions so people think about it.
I have a strong example of a book.
Okay?
Um, Skin Game in the Dresden Files. The character Goodman Gray.
We don't want to spoiler that for people because that's
older though.
Yeah, but there are people here who are still reading the Dresden Files. So, there are some incredible plot twists in the Dresden Files, and I just forestalled my husband from giving you any because anybody who's reading it for the first time, I want you to suffer the way I did. So, yeah, so as you look at these things, as you see these stories coming together, right, exactly, Ellie. These are the kinds of things that you should be doing as an author. If you're going to use a big plot twist where there is a sudden and abrupt, like, oh damn moment in your story that is going to kind of come out of left field, you need to seed it in advance. And that means using foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is really the name of the game here. So plot twists are fantastic, but without foreshadowing, the audience will end up with whiplash, and when they go back later and still can't piece out how they ended up where they are, they aren't going to be happy about it. It's not going to be a positive experience for them. So, foreshadowing is the name of the game. Now, foreshadowing can be done very delicately. It can be done by seeding conversations, having characters mention something. This would be a great way to use the concept of Chekhov's gun. I have mentioned it before, and I'm sure I will talk about it again, but Chekhov's gun is a philosophy in playwriting where Anton Chekhov, at one point when talking about plays, said if you put a gun on the wall in the first act, if it hasn't gone off by Act 3, you've made a mistake. So you are using these things, like you are putting Chekhov's guns into your novel, metaphorically speaking. You are going to be putting in foreshadowing for these twists to some extent. It can be subtle, it can be not overt, it can be a whole lot of different methods. For example, so let's talk about Star Wars, since that's in my brain right now. In Star Wars, you have Ben Kenobi talking about Luke's father and how he died and he was a Jedi and all of these things. There's not a whole lot of foreshadowing saying that Vader is Luke's father until that moment of revelation. But if you look back, you can see that all of this conversation about Luke's father, that he was a Jedi, that he died, and all this other stuff, the way Ben Kenobi talks about him, and the amount of time they dedicate to talking about him, shows that he was really important. This isn't just some rando. This guy mattered. And he matters all the way through, and in the second movie, we get that moment of join me and we can rule the universe together as father and son, and we end up with this experience of, oh damn, but it feels organic. It doesn't feel as though Deus Ex Machina has happened and all of a sudden things are different. Like you're in the middle of a fantasy movie and the main characters get abducted by aliens and now it's sci-fi. So it doesn't take you out of the story and the experience. It doesn't take you out of the world. It doesn't make everything suddenly weird or wrong. But it does throw a different light on some characters in ways that a reader or viewer won't expect. And that is the purpose of a plot twist. If your plot twist is going to take the story that they have strapped themselves into up to this point and turn it into a different genre, then you have made a dire mistake. If you are plot twisting because you, as a writer, haven't come up with a way to get into or out of a problem, you are also making a mistake. You have to make sure that any kind of plot twist you have is serving your book and isn't going to be a matter of, I haven't thought this through, so now I'm doing things. I have seen authors do that before, and it is tragic every time. And I don't really advocate for it, because if you are trying to use a plot twist as a way to fix the fact that you can't think your way out of or around a problem, then you are not doing yourself any favors, and it will be obvious in your novel. I'm not sure whether or not that's true, Ellie. I can't corroborate it, so I haven't got any idea. It's possible, though. I have not watched Naruto, so I don't have an opinion on Kaguya. But it's possible. So let's try and think of some bad plot twists, like things that we saw coming and we're like, ugh, really? Why did you go that route? Feel free to post some examples in the chat of really like poorly done plot twists where you're like, oh, what a twist, and roll your eyes. Consider some of those. What makes a bad plot twist bad? Like, what makes it stink? One of the things that will make a plot twist not work for you is if it doesn't feel satisfying. That is something that we are going to, yep, Carly, you got exactly a good one. Doing a cliche one that readers can see a million miles away and it's just a worn cliche, oh no. Yep. The writer doing something dumb but pretending it's not, yeah.
What about over foreshadowing? Basically just directly telling the audience it's coming.
Yep, my husband in the background said over foreshadowing, basically telling the entire audience that it is in fact coming. I mean, yeah, it's a good example if the entire movie was awful. It doesn't need to be an awful thing in a good movie. So there are going to be a lot of things. Cliche plot twists are one of them. Cliches are not by their nature a bad thing. You can use them. Just make sure you're doing it with intention. I always keep coming back to spicing in writing when I talk about adding different pieces and parts because I like to cook and frankly I'm usually hungry around this time of day, so we're going to talk about food. A good plot twist is like an ingredient in a dish that you kind of didn't expect but is really delicious there anyway. Creeping terror twist. Yep, okay. That's good. So a twist that does nothing to further the story. The fact that there's some kind of big, stunning revelation that has absolutely no impact on the plot or the characters whatsoever. That is a very good example of a plot twist that is deeply ineffective. Avalon High, it sounds like they were not being genuine to the story, which is kind of sad, and it looks that's a big problem by itself. All right, so all of these things, what made them bad? What did you not like about these plot twists? Like, what made it not work for you? And I know I'm asking a lot of questions this week. It felt untrue to the story. That's a really good example of a plot twist that doesn't work. You're taking a story and turning it into something it isn't, and that doesn't make sense for that story. That's a perfect example of an awful plot twist and something to avoid doing. If the story you're writing, you have this twist, and you're forcing it because for whatever reason you think you need a twist, even though maybe you don't. It could be a good story without it. So a plot twist that is not in fact exciting and is awful and boring. Kataru, the Star Wars sequels don't count as plot twists that don't work. Like, the whole movies aren't plot twists that don't work, but I will... So, narrow it down a little bit. What plot twists did you think don't work in the new Star Wars movie? Yeah, okay. So, Palpatine being Rey's grandfather for no apparent reason that had no effect on the story. I would agree that that is a really crappy plot twist, because it happened at the very end and meant nothing. I don't hate Star Wars, let me be clear. I really enjoy Star Wars, and I liked the new movies well enough. Yeah, Snoke would have been a much better villain in the end, but here we are.
Careful. You're gonna start a whole thing.
I might start a whole thing. I'm not going to let everybody just hang around and hate on Star Wars so that we don't, upset people, but that is a good example of a plot twist that was ineffective. Regardless of what you feel about the movies, that particular twist, they took it out of some of the books and they kind of shoehorned it into the movie, and it didn't really work because they didn't stick the landing so well. It just, and sure, that is a very valid opinion. It's not one that I have about the sequel trilogy. I enjoyed them. So yeah, those are some plot twists that are awful. So yeah, that was a good twist. Like, Luke and Leia being twins. Like, oh damn. No wonder they're so close. That works.
Especially when they kissed.
Yeah, that was mentioned. Yeah.
What a kiss.
So we have some good examples and some really bad examples, and the things that separate them. Yeah, they were. So the things that separate good plot twists from bad ones. Good ones fit the narrative. Luke and Leia being twins, that works in the narrative, and it was a surprise, but it didn't damage anything. It did, however, change something important in the story, because that didn't end up being the love story that everyone thought it would. Instead, Leia and Han got together, which was... The hero didn't get the girl, which was weird at the time. So you had a good one. You have plot twists that, like The Sixth Sense... Oh, everything crashed. Look at that. Give me a second. This is exciting. Oh, Discord, why have you done this to me? We're just gonna pause this for a second. Speaking of twists, my my Discord crashed. So, I guess that's a twist. No, it wasn't caused by a cat. Discord just decided it hated me for no reason whatsoever, and here we are. Okay, yes, the recording is still working. I paused it. We'll see what happens. I mean, usually my Discord doesn't crash in the middle of recording, so... Alright. So the good plot twists are... You can see them even in retrospect, maybe. So, Sixth Sense, if you watch the movie knowing about the end, you can see these things kind of coming together. There are certain movies, like what is it? There's a magician movie. There are a number of magician movies where if you watch it and you can see the whole thing come together and you look back in retrospect and you're like, oh, how did I miss that? That is a good twist. And in order to set these things up, we use foreshadowing. You can throw readers off by foreshadowing something that doesn't actually happen the way they think it's going to happen. So you can set it up to make the bad guy look like the bad guy and in fact not be. The author, who shall not be named, did a reasonable job with this with Professor Snape, who was set up through the whole series to be the bad guy or an antagonist, but in the end turned out to not in fact be the bad guy that he'd been set up to be through the whole series. He was still an awful person. He was still a jerk, but he wasn't the on the side of evil character that he'd been set up to seem like. So that was actually a pretty well done plot twist, as much as I'm not a fan of that author. There are a lot of examples of things like that. So pulling a bait and switch on your readers in a way that makes sense, setting a character up to seem evil or seem like they've got something going on or seem like they're planning something, when in fact the thing they're planning is not malicious, but they may just not be wanting to talk about it, or it might not be malicious in the way they think, or a character who spends the entire series trying to be the bestie of the main character, being really close to them, and then turns out to be the bad character, the antagonist the whole time. So, I don't know how many of you have seen WandaVision, but at this point I think it's been out long enough that most everybody who wanted to see it has seen it. So I'm going to say it being Agatha all along is, they did an entire dance routine about it. It was a plot twist, but it wasn't one that came out of absolutely nowhere, because you knew something was up with her the entire time. Yeah, Frozen. That is a perfectly reasonable way to handle it, because Frozen, the prince being the antagonist, being the bad guy, the one she falls in love with at the beginning, subverting that trope, is a brilliant way of doing a plot twist. Subverting a trope and setting people up to follow what the trope says or follow the cliche and then turning the cliche on its head at the last minute in a fun way is a great way to apply a plot twist. I'm sorry to hear that, Mads. I apologize if I spoiled anything for you, but it is still a phenomenal show that when you see it, my commentary shouldn't surprise you. When you see it, it won't be a big surprise. There are some villains who get away with it. There's some villains who don't. Ellie, yeah, there are definitely clues in Frozen saying, hey, don't marry somebody you've only known for a short time. But I mean, Ariel's dad said the same thing in The Little Mermaid, and she ends up marrying Eric and everything goes hunky-dory. So they were playing off that expectation that viewers had, and then turning it on its head by saying, actually, no, she shouldn't marry somebody she didn't know. Yeah, his behavior is never foreshadowed, which they should have a little bit, but I mean, Frozen had really weak writing to begin with. I'm just going to say that outright. Like, the story of Frozen was not written very well because apparently it was supposed to be two different movies and they kind of smashed things together and did a whole bunch of rewriting and post-production. So they were sort of cobbling something together out of parts, which is why Frozen feels kind of disjointed. I don't hate the movie, but it certainly is not narratively particularly strong. Raichu, that's a good example. There are, let's see, plot twists. The end of Romeo and Juliet, where, one of them fakes their death and then the other one kills himself and then they die and then everybody dies. I mean, I'm not saying that I really enjoyed Romeo and Juliet. I think it's garbage, but at the same time, the ending is kind of a plot twist. Yeah, what is checking a pulse? I mean, back then, I don't know that she would have known to or how to check a pulse. But, whatever. So, there are a lot of examples of things like that happening through history. And I mean, with Romeo and Juliet, we kind of knew it wasn't going to end happily for them because, first off, it's billed as a tragedy. So, Raichu, yeah, they could have done some foreshadowing. There were probably ways to go about it. If I spent a lot of time thinking about it, I could probably come up with a few where they could have done at least a little foreshadowing or had him, like, maybe they could have had some discussions about inheritance and nobility and such. Like they could have had, the oblesse n'oblige. The oblige noblesse. Sorry, I got that entirely backwards. Spoonerism. But things like that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Titanic isn't a plot twist because, I mean, we know the boat sank.
Aw.
Yeah, I know. Terrible. It's like all the Jesus movies. It's like, well, we know he's dying in the end.
Stop giving away all the endings.
Yeah, I know. Spoiler alert. Yeah. So, movies about history, I mean, there were people who were mad when other people were talking about the Titanic and spoiling the fact that it sank. There were folks who were actually angry on social media, and that has never failed to amuse me. But that aside, thank you, lead. So foreshadowing. What is foreshadowing to you? Like, what do you think foreshadowing is? I'm sure most of you know, but what is foreshadowing? Yep, clues.
Or subversive hinting.
My husband says subtle or subversive hinting. Dropping stealthy hints, yep. Clues that can be understood more than one way. I like that definition. That's a good one. Planting doubts in the mind of the reader, yeah. Yeah, details you don't think are important but turn out to be very important. That's a good example, right, Joy? I like it. Doom. I mean, all right, sort of Damocles style. All right, I can get down with that. Yeah. That would have been a foreshadowing. So, foreshadowing, we have defined it thoroughly here, is planting seeds that are later going to turn into something. Yeah, that absolutely can be a thing. Yeah, no man may kill me. It's fine, Angel. You're totally fine. I'm not gonna judge anybody who's watching material or reading material because life happens. So you've got all of these things, and the way you thread them through a story can really create that. It'll heighten that plot twist. It'll make it so it feels organic, because while a reader or viewer may not see it coming, after they've read it, things will click in their head and they'll be like, oh, I should have seen this. That is the moment we all hunger for. Is the moment where our readers go, why did I not see this coming? Ugh. And we feed off of that pain like vampires. And that is more or less what foreshadowing's function is. Now, how you do it can be up to you. And I know we're talking about plot twists here, but foreshadowing is such a huge and important plot twist. That is not a plot twist to anybody who knows me. I'm awake all night and hiss in the sunlight and burn like a motherfucker. Anybody who knows me, that is not a surprise. I don't sparkle, though. Except for my nails right now, because I've got glittery nail polish. But shut up! So, yeah, you don't need to have plot twists. They are not a required part of reading. Raichu, yeah, that's a fun one. Certain genres kind of expect a bit more of a plot twist than others, so police procedurals and mysteries, a lot of the time, are kind of expected to have some kind of twist that people didn't see coming. Not everyone has to. Sometimes a case can be straightforward, but there are some genres where a twist is kind of expected. Now, just because something is expected doesn't mean you have to use it, but it is certainly something that is useful. Yes, exactly. Very nice, Matt. And yeah, enjoying the surprise, it should feel good, and the surprise should feel rewarding. Like, it might suck at the time, particularly if the plot twist is like a beloved character's in fact evil, and it might hurt, and people will be like, oh no, how have you done this to me? And like I said, we feed on that. Yeah. Delicious. Um, yeah, that hurts my brain a little bit, Kataru. I don't know much about Bayonetta, but that sounds painful. Um, so these are other tech like the other techniques for plot twists are things like the reader may not see it coming, you might not have foreshadowed it much, but it makes perfect sense. Or it isn't something that's going to destroy a thing. So we're going back to Star Wars again. Darth Vader being Luke's father wasn't really alluded to anywhere. It wasn't made obvious. There wasn't a lot of foreshadowing. It was obvious that Luke's father was important, but his identity wasn't really foreshadowed, and it was believed by everybody that he was dead. And the moment we find out that he's Luke's father, it is a pretty significant plot twist. But it doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel like, this isn't realistic. This doesn't make sense. How could this, like, who let this dingus in here? Like, you don't get that feeling from it. A plot twist that comes out of nowhere and doesn't feel like it makes sense to the story. I'm going to mention, let's see, what are they? The Anita Blake books. Most of you here haven't read them, but anybody who has, there is a point at which there is a character named Richard that the author based off of her husband. Partway through the series, the author and her husband got a divorce, and it was really messy. And she took a character who was pretty much a really wonderful character, he was my favorite character in the series, and turned him from a good and fantastic character and turned him into the most whiny, oh my goodness, into the most whiny, problematic, jerkish character in the series. And while that series went downhill very quickly after she and her husband got the divorce, the destruction of that character, it was kind of a plot twist, and it wasn't done for any story reason. There was no benefit to it. It didn't improve anything. And the only reason she did it was because she was angry at her ex-husband. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't blame her for having, issues with her ex-husband. That's fine. But I mean, here the picture I just posted would be a perfect plot twist. There we go. So things like that don't really work. And when it comes out of left field, if it doesn't feel like it makes sense for the character, don't do it. And if you are writing a story where you feel like, I have this plot twist, I need to include it, but I can't come up with a way to do it, so I'm just going to toss it in there and hope people notice. Exactly, Kataru. Then you're going to end up with misery. Now, you can fix it in editing, but if you're going into a story and are trying to force a part of the story, it's not going to feel organic, and it's not going to work. So if you're going to use it, make sure that you've thought it through, and then it makes sense, and you aren't just writing yourself into or out of a corner. Exactly, Raichu. Yeah. So that is one thing I do want to mention, because I've met a lot of writers who feel like there's a lot of pressure on them to have some kind of big twist in their story. Like some kind of big reveal, some kind of big, like, oh no, what a twist sort of moment in their story, and they're trying to shoehorn one in there that doesn't work because they feel pressured to. If you are feeling that way, I'm going to give you permission now to not include one. Like, if your story doesn't really have room for one, you don't need it. All right, Nidnid, if you want to talk through some of that, we can definitely work on that. Like, that is something we can discuss, and you can absolutely workshop things. Like, you've got a twist you want to put in there, but aren't quite sure how to make it work. That's one of the things this group is for, is bouncing ideas off of each other and sharing this kind of experience. My husband sent me the worst meme on the planet, and now I hate him for it, and now I must inflict it on you. Everybody, you must suffer with me. I would be apologetic in advance, but this was inflicted on me, and now I must inflict it on you. So, you just enjoy that for a while. And we can definitely talk through some of the things you're struggling with. I'm sorry, I'm having problems with that picture on my screen right now. Mostly Riker's expression, if I'm honest. Like, Picard's expression, like he just farted, and Riker looking like he wants to murder somebody, and just Data having too much fun. Like, that's not an okay picture, and I don't want it.
Shorty, Mr. T.
Why have you done this to me? I'm recording this.
If you've done
Yeah, it needs to be a pilot that is just abandoned after it's done.
Watch that pilot over and over again.
Oh, I know you would. I'd give it like 8 seasons. Alright then. So that's how today's going. Does anybody have any specific questions about plot twists or... Yeah, the pink sock of memes, right? It's been gifted to me, but I don't want it. Does anybody have anything that they want to ask about plot twists in general? Like, are there any questions, or about foreshadowing, or about how to handle things like that, or big reveals? Okay. Yeah, if you've got a really deeply specific one that's that you want to ask about your story, you can ask it a little bit later. No, there's no specific formula for what makes an appropriate amount of foreshadowing, because it kind of depends on how big the twist is and how much you want the readers to pick up on it. Ellie, I think the difference between a plot twist and a plot turn, I'm not sure that there is going to be a huge difference, though I think when people hear plot twist, they expect it to be like Sixth Sense sort of thing, where he was dead all along, but a plot turn might be the enemy succeeds at something that causes the plot to take a change. So a second act reversal. That is sort of like they get up to the midpoint and their big plan goes entirely wrong. Like the plot, the story that they've been building up since the beginning goes entirely wrong. Everything's awful, and there's kind of a big reverse in. Yeah, exactly right. You book 2 is the end of the whole of book 2 where they are. So get back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they're trying to go to the Fire Nation and beat them before Sozin's Comet, and the Day of Dark Sun and all of that, how that's kind of a red herring. Things don't go the way people expected. I would say that was... No, I thought the end of book 2 is... I thought the end of book 2 was the fight on the Day of Dark Sun. Book 3 was when Aang wakes up after the fight on the Day of Dark Sun. Or am I...
She'll have to rewatch it and find out.
Yep. Yep, Ba Sing Se falls because Zuko... Yep, that's... Okay. Okay, the Battle of Ba Sing Se is book 2. Thank you for the correction. I haven't watched it in the last 3 months. Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, okay, so we were talking about 2 different plot things that happened. There were several plot twists in Atla, so thank you for correcting me. Yes, the Battle of Ba Sing Se, when Zuko's change of heart does not go as planned. That was a plot twist, I think. There are a number of them. What is or isn't a plot twist? Okay. I think maybe getting too caught up on what's a turn and what's a twist, I think that's just a matter of verbiage. I would argue that a turn is slightly less dramatic than a twist, but both are kind of taking the story off the course and trajectory that the reader may have expected. But I don't know if there is a specific sort of formula that we can cut it down to and be like, no, it's exactly this. Because writing doesn't quite work that way. But what. So, yeah. Yeah, pretty much, Carly. You're taking what a reader expects and saying, guess what? We're not doing that. We're doing something else here. And how dramatic it is, I mean, could be a turn, could be a twist. Essentially, as I've talked about before, the whole point of this is subverting expectations. So if you're subverting a reader's expectations, whether it's a turn, whether it's a twist, how dramatic it is, doesn't really, how dramatic it is basically going to, yeah, you can absolutely do a double plot twist. There are a lot of stories that do double plot twists. We were just talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. There are double plot twists because in the end of book 2, Prince Zuko seems like he's going to be a good guy, then goes right back to the patterns of behavior that we saw, and then he regains that and learns better in book 3. I mean, so there's kind of a reversal of the plot twist, so to speak. You can have multiple different stories. You can have multiple plot twists per book, or per story. I mean, Atla's a whole series. I wouldn't try and put that in a single book. That would be a migraine. And yeah, Raichu, that is absolutely the case. Like, the plot twist is not an absolute necessity for a story. You can have one, and you can say, okay, I would like to have a big twist in my story at some point, and I think that I really need one for the story to work. It isn't necessarily a gimmick. It depends on how it's used. Something more meta, let's see. Anagram, that's fine. Like, that's completely okay. You can do that. Amon, yeah, he was a pretty decent plot twist. He was the guy who stole bending, right? It's been a while since I watched Korra. I watched Atla more recently than I watched Korra. Okay. Yeah, like he was kind of a plot twist. Like he wasn't really the one who was expected. It didn't work the way people thought it was. So yeah, plot twists in general, they can be a gimmick if they're done badly. However, they don't have to be gimmicky. They can just be, like, uh, in the Sherlock Holmes movies, the most recent ones with Robert Downey Jr., you had the first one where that lord made it look like he had all these supernatural powers, but over time, it was revealed that Holmes was a couple steps ahead of him, and obviously he didn't have them. However, the plot twist was, there were a few of them. There was the fact that the thing that Irene Adler was after was not actually the thing that that Moriarty wanted. Blackwood's consistent use of faux magic was absolutely something that could be considered a plot twist, like showing that all of these things had causes. And there was a lot of foreshadowing in that movie. If you actually go through and watch it, yeah, Moriarty's scheme was really good. At this point in my life, I have studied narrative so much that it is very difficult for me to get caught by a plot twist, which isn't a brag. It actually can make it really awful to watch movies with me. Because I'll watch a movie and be like, oh, that's what's going to happen. There are very few movies and stories that ever catch me completely off guard. I don't remember the last one that did. Like, I don't remember the last story that caught me completely off guard.
That's why it's hard to watch movies with you.
I just said that, yeah. Yeah, my husband concurs that it's hard to watch movies with me. Um, Anagram, uh, yeah, foreshadowing abilities you want to set up. Well, could you have somebody else have those abilities, or maybe have some damage that was done by that ability that maybe they don't recognize as being immediately from that thing? You know, they come up to a scene where there's evidence that, I don't know, just pulling things out of the air, fire was used, like they burned down a town. Yeah, exactly. So you can foreshadow that things have happened, but not necessarily that it's the antagonist who's doing it himself and has that power. It might just be, things that are sort of off screen. So that is a perfectly good way of doing things and setting up like hints. Yep. And that's also realistic because as somebody with PTSD, there are things I don't talk about. Or things I don't remember clearly. I might not even remember the exact details of what happened because my brain deleted them. Yeah, this isn't just fire, this is advanced fire. I like it. Heather, I've been seeing you doing some typing. Is there a question you wanted to ask, or are you just kind of not sure? Ah, there it is. That's okay. So, how far into the story are you introducing the second genre? Like, how far are we talking? Are we talking like a chapter or two, or are we talking like a good half the book? Okay. Well, does the thriller have any? Okay, so that doesn't sound awful. No, that's fine. Like the the first couple chapters of a novel I recently edited. It's a an isekai novel, a novel where the main character gets drawn into an alternate fantasy world. And the first couple chapters actually have nothing to do with magic and just show the character dealing with problems in the mundane real world and trying to figure himself out for a few chapters with no magic whatsoever. And then he gets dragged into the magic world and the plot takes off from there. But the themes that are set up in the first couple chapters, the themes that that particular character are fighting with, are themes that carry through. So whatever you're working on in the first couple chapters, you're going to want to carry those themes through. Like, it should obviously have some kind of importance. It should be valuable to the plot. But it doesn't need to be on Front Street that the thing is fantasy from start to finish. Um, Thriller is, you can have a thriller fantasy with no problems. That's a perfectly reasonable way to do things. Yeah, Ellie, that's a thing. Um, Kataru, the plot twist is not the fact that they're entering a fantasy world. The plot twist is usually has to do with the story in the fantasy world. So yes, though, I mean, if you're trying to make the drawn into another world the plot twist, no, it's not going to work because the isekai, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of the genre if you weren't doing it that way. Oh, okay. I mean, you know. We've got a few more minutes. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah, that's a really common one. Is the evil trademark? All right. Yes, I love my cover. Angel did a phenomenal job on it. So all credit goes to her, the artist. I'm glad you found it helpful, Heather. That's wonderful. And yes, Angel did a phenomenal job on my cover. I cannot speak highly enough of her skills. When and if any of you need covers, she is top notch. No, Raichu. Isekai, the whole thing is just, Isekai is normal person drawn into fantasy world or fantasy character dropped into the real world. That's the cornerstone of the genre. Not all of them are good guy bad, bad guy good. It's more about the getting dragged out of your world and thrown into a fantasy setting or other way around. And many of them are not Japanese. It's just it's a term that comes out of anime because there's a lot of anime by that title, and so that's a common thing. Madriel, it will be coming out. The physical copy will be coming out in January along with the ebook, so it'll be coming out at the same time. I just have to read through the proof and catch the errors before it does. So that's why I ordered it now in the October so that I can get it finished up and then edited and sent back to the printer in time for January. And thank you, Madrail. I'm really excited about the physical copies, and I hope you enjoy the book as much as I enjoyed writing it. I really like it. I'm very proud of this book. Book 2 is going pretty well. I need to add some stuff to it because I have some plot threads that are just kind of everywhere. I will check out your question. Since you have it spoilered, Lee, do you want me to have your question on the recording or not? That's up to you. If not, we can wait for just a minute. Okay, I will come back to that after we are done. We have another 3 minutes, so does anybody else have anything that they want to ask? Also, my husband has suggested a future workshop idea talking about how to portray good and evil and like how to handle a good guy not being like perfect and inherently quote unquote heroic, and the antagonist not necessarily being pure evil. Like how to handle like protagonists and antagonists. So that was a discussion that we could definitely have. And also it brings into the thought process of how do we set up sympathetic antagonists or deal with main protagonists who aren't necessarily what you expect. Yeah, I mean, morally gray. There are a lot of things that, in my opinion, go too far. So I like my good guys to be good guys. They can have flaws and have moments where they don't do the right thing, but if they are just completely morally gray area, it's not to my taste. So I agree on that score. Same thing with villains. Yeah, I mean, so we can talk about that some when we do that discussion. So I don't want to have the discussion before we have it, but yes, I agree that there are a lot of times where it's not done well. And yeah, Mel, I agree with you. Like there are plenty of times where it's not done super well. But we can talk about how to dirty up our heroes and polish our villains a little bit without taking away from the fact that evil may be evil and good may be good, but evil might be evil but sympathetic. And before we go too far, I'm going to just bring up Fisk from Daredevil. But yes, preview of next workshop, I'm going to be talking about Fisk from Daredevil. Yep, Watchmen. I have not watched it, but I should probably watch it in advance of the next workshop. All right, so that is going to do it for this week. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It was a pleasure to have you. I appreciate all of you coming to these lectures. I'm glad you seem to get things out of them. I'm glad you enjoy them. And I look forward to next week's talk. And Lead, I will take a look at your question as soon as we're done here. So I'm going to stop the recording, and here we go.